In this video, I'll be talking about inheritance and overriding. Common reasons to use inheritance are to promote code reuse and to use polymorphism. And code reuse through inheritance means the methods with generic functionality don't have to be re-implemented. The key benefit of overriding is the ability to define behaviors that's specific to a particular subclass type. So for abstract methods, uh, that you inherit from a superclass, you have no choice. You have to override them. You must implement the method in the subclass unless the subclass is also abstract. Abstract methods must be implemented by the concrete subclasses. This is a lot like saying that the concrete subclass overrides the abstract methods of the superclass. So you could think of abstract methods as methods you are forced to override. Consider this example in which you have a reference of animal class pointing to an instance of its child. So when you do b.eat, because b is currently pointing to an instance of horse, it would invoke the eat method of horse, but you cannot, using a reference of the parent class, you cannot invoke a child class specific methods. So now buck is a child class specific method, and b is a reference of animal pointing to a horse instance. Now using b, you can only invoke the overridden methods, right? So now eat in animal is overridden by horse class, which is given here. So you could only invoke the methods or the method names which are overridden. So now eat is overridden, and okay, considering doing something like c.buck would give you an error because buck is defined. Buck is a horse specific method and is not defined in animal. So the compiler would look at the message buck to C and then would try to find buck within the animal class. Now because the animal class has only the eat method defined, it would throw an error. In this example, this is an example which shows that you cannot have less restrictive access modifier in overridden methods. Now say for example it is permitted, then you would have a problem during runtime, because if you do b.eat during the compile time, this would be fine because even though b is pointing to an instance of horse, right, with this implementation, b.eat at compile time would be looking at this here, and then it would say, well, it's public, but at runtime it would actually be invoking this method, and it becomes invalid because you cannot access private methods from outside the class, which is what you're trying to do. And that's the reason why you cannot have less restrictive access modifiers when you're overriding a method. So here are a bunch of rules. Okay, when you're overriding, the first thing to question is if the method is inherited or not. Okay, so before you even think about overriding, you should check to see if the method is inherited from the parent class. Okay, so once you know it's inherited, then it should have the same method name. Okay, the method name should be same, as well as the exact same argument list. Okay, the return type could be the same or it could be a subtype. The access modifier could be the same or should be less restrictive than what is given in the parent class. And regarding exceptions, right, so you don't have to throw any exceptions. So the child class, the overridden method in the child class need not have any exceptions, so no exceptions needed. Even if you were to have exceptions, they could be the same exceptions as given in the parent class, or they could be subtypes, but you cannot introduce new exceptions. Cannot introduce new exceptions. So you can have no exceptions. Even if you have exceptions, they could be the same as declared in the parent type, or it could be a subtype, but you cannot introduce new exceptions. And these exceptions are unchecked exceptions. I'm sorry, these exceptions are checked exceptions. Well, however, the child class method or the overridden methods could throw new unchecked exceptions. Unchecked exceptions are runtime exceptions, like divide by zero exceptions. Okay, which need not be caught, explicitly. Okay, so just recapitulating on the rules, the argument list must be exactly the same. Okay, that's that one there. The return type must be the same, or could be a subtype. The access level cannot be more restrictive. Well, it could be less restrictive, or it could be the same. Okay, this is the one that deals with the inheritance part. Now, if I have a parent class with a private method or a final method, and if I have a child class, say this is x, this is y. If I have a child class with x and y methods, okay, say private and final, okay, don't think that x and y are overridden, even though they seem to have the same name. They're just, they just happen to be different methods. Like, they are just methods which belong to C with the same name as x and y, right? These are not overridden because these two methods are not inherited into the child class. Okay, so a subclass within the same package as the instance is superclass can override any superclass method that is not marked private or final, right? So the first question again to ask is to see if a method is inherited before you talk about if it's overridden or not. Now, say for example, okay, again, across different packages, you can only override methods which are public or protected, because only these two sort of methods could be inherited into classes which are given in external packages. So if I were to have okay, say if I were to have a class x with a method y in package b1, and in package b2 I have and say this is default. If I have class z extending x, and if I do y with the same method definition as this, it wouldn't be overriding, because this is a default access which is not inherited into my class y, or whatever this class is. Okay, so the default members are not inherited. So if I were to have a method with the same name as y, which is y here, let's call this z, then this won't be overriding. So overriding needs inheritance. So to override a method, you need to inherit the method first, and then apply all the overriding rules, and then it's overridden. The overriding method can throw narrow or fewer exceptions. It cannot throw checked exceptions that are new or broader than the ones declared by the overridden method. Okay. But it can throw any unchecked exceptions, any nuance, or any just absolutely any unchecked exceptions. You cannot override a method marked final. You cannot override a method marked static. If a method can be inherited, you cannot override it. Remember that overriding implies that you're re-implementing a method you inherited. Okay. So if you want to invoke a superclass method, if you want to access an overridden method from an overriding method, you gotta use super dot. It would call the overridden method of the immediate parent. Okay. Um, in this example, you could see this line would cause an issue because you're invoking eat method on reference A, which though is pointing to doc2 at compile time. The compiler would just look at this method definition and say, well, eat is invoked on a on an animal reference, so I should be looking at the compiler would be looking at this and then saying, well, it is throwing an exception which is unhandled in the main method. Okay, so that would result in a compile time error because of an unreported exception. In this example, there is a class animal with a method eat. Okay, let's take a look at a set of illegal overridden codes. This one is illegal because of a more restrictive access modifier. This method is introducing new exceptions, which is incorrect. This one is not overridden. This one is overloaded because it has the same name but has introduced new parameters. Okay, this one is not overridden, as well as it's not overloaded too. Okay, so let's see why it's not overridden. For overriding, you need to have the same name and the same argument list. Okay, which is fine, but the subtype should be, but the return type should be a subtype of this type here. But it's returning a string, so it's not overridden. Not overridden. Okay, let's see if it's if it's at least overloaded. Well, it's not even overloaded because it doesn't introduce new parameters. Okay,